Right. So today we're going deep on something pretty fascinating, even if you don't consider yourself, you know, particularly religious.
Right.
We're talking about the Pope, specifically Pope Francis.
Okay.
And his health has been making headlines. And of course, that leads to speculation about, well, what happens next for the
Yeah,
Catholic Church?
of course.
And we've got this transcript that honestly is pretty eye-opening about the challenges he's facing and what that could mean, not just for the church, but honestly,
Yeah, for the world.
for the world.
Yeah.
So, join us for this deep dive, and we'll try to break it all down.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think a lot of times people think of the Pope and they're like, oh, Sunday Mass, that's it, right?
Yeah.
But it goes so much deeper.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, this is someone who's weighed in on climate change, poverty, we're talking war and diplomacy.
Right. He's meeting with world leaders.
Exactly. So this isn't just about, internal church politics. This is someone who's on the global stage.
Absolutely. And that's what makes this whole conversation about his health so much more, I don't know, significant.
Right, right.
Because this transcript, it doesn't sugarcoat things. It really lays out some of the serious stuff he's been dealing with.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, chronic knee pain.
Yeah.
Can you imagine trying to lead these massive events, standing for hours?
Oh, it's got to be excruciating.
And then, the respiratory issues. He was hospitalized a couple of times.
Yeah, and that colon surgery back in 2021, that was a major procedure.
Oh, totally. And then this most recent respiratory infection, it's like it really paints this picture
Of increasing fragility.
yeah.
Yeah. And, to be fair, any 86-year-old
Yeah.
would be dealing with things.
Right.
But then you add on top of that the demands of the papacy.
Right, exactly.
I mean, the constant travel, the public appearances, the weight of making decisions.
For 1.3 billion Catholics.
Exactly. It's a grueling job for anyone, let alone.
Yeah, it's not like a 9 to 5, right?
No, not at all.
And, it's interesting because Pope Francis, he hasn't exactly shied away from, rocking the boat a little
Oh,
bit.
he's a reformer for sure.
Yeah, the transcript highlights his focus on climate change, social justice, reaching out to other religions.
Interfaith dialogue.
Right, which hasn't always been, top of the list at the Vatican.
Right, it's a different approach.
So I'm curious, has there been pushback from within the church to some of these changes?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
You have groups like Opus Dei, very conservative,
Okay.
and they see some of this as going too far, too fast.
In what way?
Well, his stance on LGBTQ plus issues, for example.
Right.
Some see that as too liberal. Same with his emphasis on economic equality.
It's interesting because he seems to be, trying to make the church more inclusive.
He is. And that's what's creating this tension because for some, that's a departure from tradition.
Okay, so this is where the whole question of who comes next gets really, really interesting.
Right, because it's not just about doctrine. It's about the direction of the church on the world stage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this transcript talks about the conclave, which I have to say sounds a little mysterious.
It is. You have all these cardinals gathering in secret.
Right, locked away until they'll...
Tight smoke.
Yeah, it's like papal Game of Thrones or something.
Huh. There's definitely drama there. You've got different factions, different theological leanings.
Right, so are there, front runners, people we should be watching?
There are always names being floated, but honestly, the conclave is unpredictable.
Oh, so it really could be anyone.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so fascinating, right? Because depending on who gets elected, we could see a huge shift.
What if a more conservative pope comes in and rolls back some of Francis's environmental initiatives?
Yeah, that's a concern for some, but others argue that even a conservative pope can't ignore climate change.
Because it's such a pressing issue.
Exactly. The science is there, the moral imperative.
Right. So maybe it's not as black and white as, liberal pope, conservative pope.
Right. It's more nuanced than that.
Okay, so then there's the big question.
The elephant in the room.
Yeah, resignation.
Right.
I mean, Pope Francis himself said the door is always open.
And we have the precedent now, right? Benedict XVI actually did it.
So, I mean, is this a real possibility?
It's hard to say, but the transcript does highlight what he's probably considering.
Okay, like what?
Well, can he effectively lead with his health declining?
Right.
Can he ensure his reforms continue?
Makes sense.
And maybe even, avoid some kind of messy power struggle if he waits too long.
Whoa, I hadn't even thought about that.
Yeah, it's something to consider, right?
Yeah.
Because these transitions, they can be tricky.
So this is all, super interesting for Vatican watchers, but
Right.
what does it mean for the rest of us?
Well, I think what's important to remember is that Pope Francis, he's not just been about reforming the church.
Okay.
He's put these huge global issues on the table: climate
Hmm.
change, poverty, migration.
Right, like you said, he's a global figure.
Exactly. And whoever comes next, they inherit that legacy.
So it's not just about Catholics, it's about, like, the direction of the world.
In a way, yes. And the question for all of us is, are we ready to continue those conversations?
It's definitely food for thought. Thanks for breaking all this down for us.
My pleasure.
And for our listeners, we've seen how the papacy can be this, I don't know, this force for change.
For
So the
sure.
question I'd leave you with is, what kind of world do we want, and what role do we want the next pope to play in that?
It's a good question to ponder, no matter your faith.
Absolutely.